Welcome, everyone, to day 2, Understanding Your Role. This is for faculty, staff, and student training for those who would like to sit on a formal hearing panel. My name is Stephen Mosley. I'm the coordinator for Student Integrity and Conduct at Nova Annandale. I am co-presenting this with Merrill Bentley, who is a coordinator for Student Integrity and Conduct at the Alexandria campus. Let's talk about understanding the basics before the hearing begins. This is very important. It's very important that you, as panel members, you set the tone, that your attitude sets the tone for the hearing, that you're self-aware. This is one of the reasons why we ask you to come on time. Generally, we will ask you to come between 10 to 30 minutes before hearing begins so that you can be aware of your surroundings, get to know your other panel members, and also greet the complainant and the respondent and any witnesses they may have before the hearing. Make sure that they have a feel that they will be treated fairly and with respect. Also, since we sent them a formal hearing notice to this, it also has the date, time, and location of the hearing. As a result, they're going to expect that this hearing would start on time. So we want to be respectful of that. We want to remind you that confidentiality is required to serve on a formal hearing panel. All panelists are required to keep the information confidential. So you won't be discussing this at the water cooler or after the hearing's over. And once you leave the room, it's over. You don't discuss it outside of the room. I would love to encourage you to dress professionally and make sure you come with a mindset of fairness, development, and the idea of engagement and retention as our priority. Most importantly, to be well prepared, it's just like skiing or snowboarding. The more time you spend on the mountain, the better you're going to be. Same thing with the code of conduct. The more time you spend reading the code, knowing the code, the better panelist you're going to be. Your responsibility is to know whether someone has violated the code of conduct. The best way to know the nuances of the code is to read it. Let's take a moment to talk about some definitions. First off, you are here because you were selected to serve on the student conduct panel. That is any person or persons that are appointed to determine whether a student has violated the student code of conduct. That's you. You were here to figure out, did a student violate the code of conduct? That is your mission. Outside of that, you are responsible to recommend sanctions that may be imposed when a student is found responsible for violation of the code of conduct. The term student means an individual who has applied to NOVA and has registered for classes. Now, the second part of this definition is important. It's an individual who is considered an active student is a person who has been a student for a period of 3 years following their last enrollment. So a student is a student of NOVA, or a person is considered a student of NOVA if they registered for class, took classes, and they are an active student for a period of 3 years after their last enrollment. So picture this. You can graduate from NOVA, go on to your favorite 4-year institution, graduate there in 2 years, and still be considered our student. That is a very important distinction because all those who are our student, according to our code, will have the same due process rights. Now let's talk about the 2 types of students you will see in the formal hearing student conduct panel. Accused student and a complainant. Now, of course, both of these students can bring in witnesses, but it's generally around these 2 students. Now, the accused student, or sometimes referred to as the respondent, means any student accused of violating the student code of conduct. The second student would be the complainant. Now, generally, this is the person it is always the person who submits the complaint, but it's generally the person who is either the target or victim of the alleged violation, but not always. Sometimes the complainant could be a third party, such as NOVA PD. Let's say a student, we'll call her Sally, reports to NOVA PD that Jessica stole her watch. Well, NOVA PD may bring this report to conduct. Conduct may decide to move forward, and it will be NOVA PD who's the complainant versus the accused student. The most important part here for you to understand is the accused student is the person who's being accused of violating the code. The complainant is a person who submits the complaint. Let's continue. The term advisor. The term advisor means any individual that has been designated by the accused student or even the complaining student to assist them through the hearing process. This includes a person who could be a family member, a campus community member, a faculty member, a friend, a spouse, or even an attorney. So yes, lawyers are welcome in our process, but the advisor has a unique role. They're there to assist these students through the process, but they are not allowed to address the formal hearing panel or cross-examine. This isn't Law and Order, okay? The advisors there just more as a moral support, maybe to help them form their questions, but they're not there to litigate on their behalf or to ask questions of the panel or of the complainant or respondent. Evidence. This is testimony, whether it's oral or written testimony. Exhibits, documentary material, whether it's Facebook posts, videos, or in-person testimony. This is all evidence. I would encourage you to weigh all evidence equally. So you would take the evidence and you weigh them. You know, is it direct evidence? Is it indirect evidence? But one thing to caution against, just because a person doesn't physically show up for their formal hearing, it doesn't mean they don't care. Also, it doesn't mean they have not presented evidence. If they presented written testimony or video or pictures, you need to consider that information, just as if the person was sitting across from you. Due process. Every student at Northern Virginia Community College is given due process, an opportunity for a fair hearing. The student will give some type of notice and will know when the formal hearing is to be held, the day, time, and location. The Dean of Students Office will take care of all that for you. All you'll need to do is show up. So let's talk more about your role. See, the provost will appoint 3 members of from the pool to serve on a hearing board. So if you are a part of this training today, the provost has already appointed you to serve in some capacity in the future on a hearing board. What will happen when we need you is the provost will send you an email, or a designee will send an email to you asking you if you can serve on a formal hearing panel. As we discussed, due process, our standard of proof, and just a reminder, this is not a legal proceeding. As due process, we will make sure that both students are given some kind of notice and some kind of hearing. In this case, a formal hearing. The standard of proof, very important for you to remember. Our standard of proof is preponderance of the evidence. Big words to say, more likely than not. 51%. Like I said, we are not the court system. We're not Law and Order. We're not the legal system. So we do not use their burden of proof. They use words like guilty, not guilty. We don't use those words. We don't use those terms. We don't use that terminology, nor do we use that burden of proof. We don't use more likely, beyond a reasonable doubt. We use a standard called more likely than not, preponderance of the evidence. Best way to remember this is 51%. Is it more likely than not that X, student violate our code of conduct? So is it more likely than not that Jimmy violated our code of conduct? That's the type of language that we use. So let's talk about the roles. First off, you would have an administrative hearing officer. That's someone like me, a conduct officer or a dean of students. They're there to ensure that all procedures are being followed. They're a non-voting member. So I may be in your hearing, Merrill Bentley may be at the hearing, one of your deans may be in a hearing, but they're simply there to make sure that the process goes forward as dictated by our code of conduct. Let's talk about your role. If you're a faculty or staff member, you may be asked to serve as a facilitator or a chief chair officer there. The facilitator, their responsibility is to read the script. Did I mention we give you a script? Yeah, we make it really simple for you. We want to make sure from beginning to end, you know exactly what to say and you know exactly what to do. That's what the purpose of the script. So you will be given a script to know from beginning to end what's supposed to happen. The facilitator also regulates the structure. They make sure everyone understands they're the one that's controlling this meeting. They're the ones who the panel, the students, the complainant and the respondent will address. They are the ones who will direct the questions. They regulate the structure of the meeting, of the formal hearing. And they are a voting member. Secondly, we have another faculty or staff member. They will be the clerk. This is a timekeeper. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we want to make sure that the hearing goes in a timely manner. So about 30 to 45 minutes for the hearing. You would dismiss the complainant, respondent, and all participants, and then you guys, as the hearing board, will get together for 15, 30 minutes to deliberate. This is also a voting member. Finally, we have the student. The student serves as a recorder. So we audio record all of our formal hearings. The student will have a recorder. They will hit record. The student will also be transcribing the events because sometimes technology doesn't work. Sometimes recorders fail. We want to make sure that you have an accurate description of what happened in the meeting. The student's also a voting member. So when you review and analyze information, I want to encourage you, identify and classify the information. Use direct facts, witnesses, make sure they're substantiated. Also, sometimes you'll have circumstantial facts, information that requires inference, such as hearsay. Evaluate it. Make sure you look at the relevance of each piece of information. Also, judge the student's credibility. If they have a pattern of lying inside the meeting, that's going to impact their credibility. I want you to remember our standards. I will always say, hey, you know what? This is a science, and it's true. Being on a formal hearing board, it's science and art. The science is easy. You're coming in a room, you're going to listen to people, and you're listening to our students, and you're going to make a decision based on our code of conduct. And we give you the code of conduct, we give you our sanctions. That part's easy. The art is what's not easy. It's an art form to listen. Listening is an art form. And it's also an art form to figure out between two sides who is telling the truth. It's also hard, not easy, to figure out more likely than not in some cases. So we want to encourage you, know the who, what, when, where, why, and how as you're listening to these cases. We put you on this board because we know that you have the ability, you have the know-how, and the resources together to be able to do a good job of being fair to each student and using our standard more likely than not. I will point out, everyone does not have to agree, but all decisions are to be respected. Decisions are made by a majority of vote. So here's how I recommend you do it. After a hearing, after you've dismissed everyone, you're sitting around with your other panel members, go around and say how each one of you plans to vote and why. So if you're listening to an academic dishonesty case, you say, well, I think the professor is right. The student violated code of conduct, and here's why. They provided a report that shows the student copied 80% of another student. That's why I believe them. And have every single person go around and share their reasons why they do or do not find the student responsible. Someone else may say, well, I don't find Jack responsible because him and Sue Beth, they're married. They talk all the time. And, I think the 80 is more just personality flares, not answers. You have a discussion about it, and then you vote. Majority vote wins. Our standards in our code of conduct, we divide them into 3 sections: minor, moderate, and major. So sometimes someone can violate code of conduct. You go, well, it's not a major issue. It's not a minor issue. This is a minor issue. It's an issue, but it's a minor issue. And so we would say that person, their sanctions should be anywhere from a warning to probation. Moderate, from warning to deferred suspension, which means, one more shot, then you're out of here. A major violation of the code of conduct warrants something that's more serious, and that could be suspension or expulsion. After you've figured out if a person has violated our code of conduct, you will also make recommendations of what the sanction would be. So first you have an administrative sanction, which is anything from a warning to expulsion. Then you have educational sanctions. The question here is, remember, they are all our students. So if a student has violated our code of conduct, what do you want them to learn through this process? We can give them an educational sanction from community service to writing a paper to meeting with a staff member, doing a research paper, and also restitution. How can we help our student who's been found responsible for violating our code of conduct? How can we help them learn from this experience? And also, as you go around, make sure your justification is recorded. Make sure that it's not just we think he's responsible, but you also have the why. Remember, our burden of proof rests on the complainant, so it is America, and in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. Same thing here. The accused student, in the last analogy, let's say Professor Jones accuses Matt of cheating. Matt doesn't have to prove that he didn't cheat. Matt doesn't have to prove anything. He's being accused. The person who has to prove Matt cheated is the professor. The professor has to present the information to show Matt violated our code of conduct. Matt is not responsible even if Matt chooses to say nothing. It is his right. Because Matt does not have to prove he didn't do it. The professor in this analogy, the complainant, has to prove that he did. And that's with every case. The complainant always has the burden of proof. They must prove that whatever event they're saying occurred, that it actually occurred. Remember our standard, preponderance of the evidence. That's more likely than not, 51%. Good question to ask yourself is, did the accused student more likely than not violate our code of conduct? If you say yes, then you're finding them responsible. If you say no, then you're finding them not responsible. Whether you find them responsible or not responsible, it is still your responsibility to provide a justification. This is our NOVA standard. The chairperson will then write the deliberation report. This report must be typed. We will give you the document. You must type it and submit it back to us within 72 hours. This is our official document. It will go in the student's disciplinary record, so make sure everything is spelled correctly, all the names are spelled correctly, their name is spelled correctly, the complainant's name, the respondent's name, and that your justification is based on the facts. If you have any questions about this presentation or any of the other presentations here on how to serve on a student conduct panel, please reach out to me or my colleague Meryl Bentley. We would love to assist you. That's all the time we have for today. I hope you have a great day.